All right, as far as reels go, for the walleye, I mean the northern pike, so you've got your heavy rod over there, right there. You want to, look, and this is another one of those, it's as much or as little as you want to do as you want to invest in it. So I've seen some people go to Walmart and get Zebco 33 reels and show up with 2 of those, and they fished all week and it worked for them. But I've also seen people show up with those and the fish strip the bearings out of them because they're catching big fish and they're dragging them around, and all of a sudden they don't have a break left on their reel. If you're planning to, you've been fishing in Canada before, and kind of the Great Lakes area, northern part of Minnesota, things like that, and you have tackle that makes sense, or you want to get tackle and you plan to do this more than one time, get some good stuff. You don't have to spend tons of money, but like this particular reel, this is the kind of reel. This happens to be an Ambassador 5000 by Abu Garcia. I've had it a long time, probably given to me by my dad years ago, and literally no maintenance. I've probably fished with it 20 years. I change the line every year or 2 that I go fishing. It's got some pretty heavy 12-pound probably test on it, but that's a great reel for northern pike. Here's another one, and you'll see kind of these open face reels. That's pretty standard northern pike kind of reel. This one's another Abu Garcia Ambassador Royal. It's got a little bit lighter line, maybe a 10 or 12 pound on this one, but that's a kind of a standard northern pike setup. But I told you, some people will show up with an old Zebco. This is a 404. I won't bring this to Canada just because I have this other stuff. For me, that might be something you carry to a pond to catch some bluegill or something with. Same thing with this kind of a little, who makes this thing, a little Daiwa. For me, that's too light for what we're going after. You could use it for some walleye. We'll talk about that here in a minute, but I'll show you something that I'd prefer. But once again, it's all about what you want to put into it. If you want to invest some money and get some decent stuff that you're going to use for years, you can do that. The other thing I get asked, what about fly fishing? My dad and I will take a fly rod almost every year, and I'll try to catch some northern on it, just to say I do. And I mean, it's a fight when you catch a 40-inch northern on a fly. It's a 20-minute fight, 30-minute fight to get him landed, if you're going to get him landed. But it's a lot of fun, and it's a lot of action. Once again, in that kind of slow water we talked about earlier. Here's a fly that I dug out that it's a big, probably 6-inch long fly with a big couple of hooks there, big trailing single hook here, and that's something I would use for northern pike, because they do come up. All right, let me close this. So on to walleye. Walleye are smaller than northern pike. They're big fish and they're strong fish, but they're smaller, so they're going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 pounds, 6 pounds. They're not going to be 10 pounds, 15 pounds, and so I would use lighter tackle. This is probably a 6-foot graphite rod compared to that bigger northern pike rod over there, which was 7 or 8 feet. Let's see. Yeah, it's another foot longer in this one. So this is a 6-foot, real light tip. Probably use 4 to 6 pound test on walleye, and generally don't use a wire leader. Now, if I lose a jig or two while I'm trying to jig up walleye, I will put a wire leader on. I generally don't, but if the northern are down there snapping your line off, then you want to do that. Generally, for jigging for walleye, I'll use an open face reel like this. This is a Mitchell 2G. Had it a long time. Once again, probably 4-pound test line on that, and it's obviously a hang down reel, open face, as opposed to those two, or that open face Abu Garcia like that one for northern pike. So I will bring 2 reels like that, and probably 2 reels like that, and I'll bring for me probably 3 rods, because I've been there, and once in a while you'll strike a fish. It doesn't happen every year, but you strike a fish and your rod tip breaks, and it's generally easier in the boat if you have two rods with you. One you can use for northern, one you can use for walleye, because you've already tied your lures on, you've already got your wire leaders on there, and it's just easier to switch really quickly. If you're catching fish, or you need to switch, or you see a big northern you want to get on it, it's easy to grab that rod. And so I'll always have a northern rod and a walleye rod with me, and probably bring one extra rod and like 1 or 2 extra reels, one of each kind, in case a reel breaks or something happens. Probably, you know, it's the power of numbers. So if you're traveling with somebody, maybe between you bring an extra reel or 2, and both of you don't have to bring 2 extra reels, that kind of thing, because the likelihood of both of you breaking a rod tip or both of you breaking a reel, not that high. So that's that. Let's look at the only thing I really wanted to show you for a walleye. Let me turn this around here. Walleye, I just laid out here just a Mr. Twister body and a jig head. That is kind of my go-to if I'm really trying to jig up walleye. That's kind of my go-to deal. It doesn't have to be a yellow jig, could be white, could be any kind of color. You'll try different ones. Here's one. This one's been in the battle. You can see the head's been all scraped off from a walleye. That's a big, maybe a 1/4 ounce jig head, something like that. And you can see he's got the wire leader already put on there, and you can see the barb is bent down on the hook, and that's a perfect rig for jigging walleye. Now, as I said, you can cast for walleye. You can use a MEPS. You can drag it deep. Walleye will grab a deep running Rapala, and when I say deep, you generally are going to find walleye in between 8 and like 12 or 15 feet of water. One thing I was going to show you down here, and once again, remember, all this stuff is accumulated over years for us. And my wife loves to fish, I love to fish, my dad and brother and I have been to Canada 25 times probably, so you accumulate all this stuff over time. Doesn't mean you have to have it all the first year, but you'll kind of get the idea. There's certain things you're going to want. You know, you're going to buy your lures. Like I said, you might have just 20 jigs and 10 of these other sort of pieces of metal and surface lures and things like that, and that's perfectly enough. That's fine. Just depends on you. This is helpful. This is old, but it's a portable depth finder, and so obviously we take it with us. It works off 8D batteries, so I'll take 8D batteries, get it going while we're there. We'll run it for the 5 days we're fishing, then I'll throw the D batteries out just to lighten my load because they're pretty well used up. But it helps find those walleye. It'll help you find that 12 feet of water where the walleye might be hanging out, or as opposed to a 20 or 30 foot piece of water that you can't tell how deep it is and the fish probably aren't down there. So if you have one, or if you got a friend that has one, or you want to bring one, obviously one of those per boat, per 2 or 3 people, is very helpful. All of these fish, all the fish that you catch has some bad teeth. I mean bad teeth. This is not bass fishing where you stick your thumb in the mouth, and everybody makes the mistake once where they just reach in there to get the lure loose and the fish bites them and your hand's bleeding for an hour, which is no fun. This is a takeoff of something called a Boga Grip, and you're going to want something. Doesn't have to be this thing at all. I'll show you a couple of different options, but you're going to want something to grab the fish. Sometimes my dad will carry actually a leather work glove, and he'll just put the leather work glove on, and you can just kind of grab the fish once you get him in the boat and he's flopping around. You can kind of just grab his body, and the leather and the work glove will kind of grab through the slime layer on the fish, because you got to get your lure out. But this grabs him by the lip, so you'd reach over the edge of the boat, grab him by the lip. Once you have that, it clamps onto his lip. You can pull him out of the water, and you're in control. That's one style. Another style is right here. This is called the lipper, and literally same thing. by the way, I point to that thing, so the lanyard, you definitely want to either have a rope tied to the boat and tied to this, or you want to have your hand through that lanyard, because what happens is you reach over the edge of the boat, you grab the fish, and if it's a 10-pound fish and he flops, a lot of times it'll knock that out of your hand, and now your lipper is at the bottom of the lake and you just lost it. And so bring a piece of, you know, twine or rope, so you can tie something like that to the gunnel of the boat. So if you do drop in the water, you can just pull the rope back up. So you're going to run into fish that are going to take your lure too deep, and I just bought these at some cheap hardware store like 25 years ago. You can see it's just a long handled pair of needle nose pliers, and it gets right in their mouth. Go down and grab that treble hook or hook, pull it out, you're good to go. And my only struggle with it is I always have to tie like a wire leader or something to it, and then some line, and hook it to the boat, because it's really easy to, once again, to drop those overboard. You've seen these are pretty inexpensive at Walmart or Bass Pro or something like that. It does the same thing, reach in their mouth, grab the hook, pull it out. A little multi-plier tool thing is often helpful, just because you might need the knife, you might need the pliers to crimp down your barbs on your hooks, or to bend a hook back if a fish bent it, that kind of thing. If you're gonna use a lot of jigs, and we use a lot of jig heads, you know how they paint them, and oftentimes they'll paint the eyelet closed. This is just something that pokes the hole back through the painted eyelet, so that you can run your line through there and tie your line to it. This is the same thing, just a little line clipper, and then on the end here you can see, it's getting dark here, but on the end here you can see that little pointed thing that'll poke through the eyelet of your jig head, so you can tie your line on. These are called spreaders, and it's just, you can see it's just a kind of a spring loaded deal, and you put that in the mouth of the northern pike or the walleye, and you let it go, and it opens his mouth up, and then you can hold the fish from right here. It's holding him by his mouth's open, and you can use your free hand to reach in there with your pliers or your forceps or whatever you want to get your lure loose, and then when you're ready to let him go, you just squeeze it shut and shake the fish off, and you're good to go. That's another pair of big spreaders. You know, a fillet knife is probably pretty important for everybody to bring a fillet knife, or at least one per boat. Obviously put it in your checked luggage, do not put it in your carry-on luggage. But if you're interested in having a shore lunch and filleting your fish, you'll want to use that. This is just kind of a lanyard that goes around your neck that has a few things on it. It has essentially a fancy fingernail clipper, a little deal that punches those holes in the jig heads, and then a little knife, a little sharpener for the hooks, in case your hooks get dull. So there's that. The last thing I have here is just a pair of forceps. You know, you may have those in your tackle box from bass fishing or whatever. Any of those things are good to have. Once again, to reach into the fish, to grab your lure and pull it out. You do not want your fingers in there unless you're wearing some kind of heavy glove. All right, we're just about done. On to the rod case. You see I have my rod case over here. I will not be bringing all these rods unless I'm outfitting my dad and my brother and I or something like that with a ton of rods. But the only thing I'm pointing to here is you want to have a decent rod case so your rods travel safely. There is foam inside the ends of the rods to protect the tips. I generally wrap some paper towels around the handles or around the tips or something, just to kind of add some padding. So if you have some bubble wrap or something like that, you can put them in there. You don't want them slamming around in there too much. What you're trying to avoid, and people don't really think about too much, is in the eyelets of your rods like this, you just don't want sharp objects kind of banging around on them. It makes them weak. And what you really don't want is on the inside of that eyelet to get some sort of a nick, and then when you're reeling in a big fish, your line catches on that nick and it actually cuts your line. So you just want to be careful with your rods, and have a rod case that you can check through with the airline and protects your stuff. So look, I think that's about it. I will think about, did I miss anything? I really want to emphasize that it's all about having a fun trip. It's all about enjoying yourself. It's not about bringing 40 pounds of lures per fisher person, right? You'll end up using 10 or 20 or 30 jigs, depends on how aggressive you are with the walleye, and 5 or 10 or 15 other lures for your northern pike. If you bring a fly rod, obviously then you bring a fly reel and you bring flies. For the other smaller fish, the sauger or the goldeye, there's another one I'm missing, but the little perch fish, obviously you want something smaller, like a really small MEPS. I'm looking around, I don't see anything that I have really laid out for them. But that's really it. It can be, I mean, everybody, there is a weight limit for the float planes per fisherman, and I can't remember, I'd have to check their website to see what it is, but we've never, ever, ever had an issue with them saying, oh, you brought too much stuff. And if we did, we'll have, a way to leave some there if somebody really is over the top with their fishing gear. But anyhow, I think that's it. I hope this was helpful for you. I can't wait till July 24th when we fly out, and July 25th when we get there and start fishing. This is just a fantastic place, and I'm excited to share it with my friends and family. All right, take care.